we were national worldwide band touring Europe, and it was the dream. I was living my dream. I lost it all, compounded by me just truly purposefully throwing my life away. I had a cellmate who had eaten a whole bag of cocaine before he got in because he didn't want to get caught with it. He was a big, scary dude. But yeah, just to tell you guys where the PTSD stems from, and there's like this grass patch, and I was running right there, I had my headphones in full blast, and then I just get bashed in the back of the head with a gun, and then I turned around and then I got pistol whipped in the face with a gun again. They found all, like, my TV, my computer, my phone they already had. I didn't have a lot to steal. Put me in a ditch face first. It's muddy, I remember, because there's water and there's some kind of stream running. I mean, the gun's pointing at my head. I know it is. I'm just sitting there waiting for a bullet, you know? Yeah, I could have either chosen to die, which would have been just keep drinking until I die, or we'll go for it again, rebuild it, get it all back and more. And that's where I'm at. I'm almost kind of glad I didn't get what I wanted.
What is up, guys? We're back with another episode of Second Order Change. I'm your host, Evan Borsier, and today we're talking to artist Drake Margolnick. Drake has done a lot of things, but you may be familiar with his work frontmanning the band Flagship, and we get into the story of that a little bit, how Flagship went away, how Flagship is now coming back. Pro tip, go check him out. Spotify, Instagram, all that fun stuff. We talk about his solo projects, and one of the big things that we really dig into is Drake's journey through his career, through PTSD, through being kidnapped functionally and almost murdered. Spoiler alert, we did the interview, so he doesn't die, but he gets awfully close, and the lasting repercussions of that, navigating that. So I am so grateful for Drake taking the time to dig into this and to be really vulnerable about what's been going on in his life. But I was so inspired by his honesty, by his courage, by his creativity, and by his vision for the future, which makes him a challenger. And you're taking the time to listen to it, which makes you a challenger as well. Because everything that we admire in others is simply a reflection of the things that we often don't give ourselves permission to admire in ourselves. So I just want to say thank you for your courage, creativity, for taking the time today, and for liking, rating, and reviewing. You know, whether you're on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, give it a like, give it a follow, leave a comment, leave a review. That stuff really makes a big difference. It helps us get out in front of other people. If you go, we share a lot of these clips on Instagram, and they're very easy to share with friends, family, anyone who you think may be inspired. And as we are stepping into the next chapter with this podcast, we're just really looking to make sure that the people who need to hear these stories, who need to hear about the power of resilience, the power of creativity, people who may be in the pit still right now, get to hear these conversations. So anything that you can do to help us get the word out is incredibly appreciated. Last thing that I want to say before we get right into this conversation is that I have two offerings that you might be interested in taking advantage of. One is that I'm doing a workshop on the finances behind creative equipment. Now, this is mostly targeted at videographers, filmmakers, and photographers, but to be totally honest, it's the same skill set, the same principles that I've used on everything from musical equipment to cars, and it's really helped me go from being a very broke minimum wage kid, didn't have trust fund money, didn't have anyone to invest in me. I had $400 in a bank account and had to build a career, and to now having, I don't even know what our current asset value is, but lots of equipment, safe to say. And these principles that we'll be teaching are things that you can use at any level, that you can use whether you are a big full-time professional or you're just getting started. And it's going to open your eyes to how to navigate that space, how to understand what you're doing, how to be confident in what you're doing, how to take educated risks, and how to keep rolling that snowball. So if you're interested in that, you can either keep an eye out on my social media accounts, Instagram, we're going to post that info, or if you want early access, you can shoot me an email. And I'm not going to tell you my email, you got to find it. It's not that hard to find. But the people who shoot me an email are going to be sent access first, and we're going to keep this workshop pretty small for now. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. Last thing to touch on is that I'm taking on a small contingent of one-on-one clients. And these are predominantly filmmakers and hybrid creatives working across video and photo. But basically, I'm going to call it Sherpaing. Some people call it coaching, some people call it mentorship. And depending on the relationship, it may be more of one of those things. But at the end of the day, I am helping you go up the mountain that you're intending to climb. A mountain which I have climbed many times over the last 13 years as I've explored everything from direct-to-client work, one-man band work, personal work, being on YouTube, building a podcast, doing personal marketing, agency world, production company world, freelance world, all of these different things, working with crews, invoices, policies, contracts, anything that comes up for you that I have any relevant experience with, I'm happy to dig into. And so the process for that is that we're taking at least 4 weeks together to go and dig into what you've done, where you're at, what your goals are, and then help suss out what are the priorities and how can we create some strategic decisions to help you get to that next level. So if you're looking to go from, hey, I've been doing these sort of small one-man band direct-to-client videography projects and I want to move into working as a part of bigger teams, or I want to work with hiring teams and that feels scary to me, or I am working in agency world and I actually want to pivot out to doing more direct-to-client work and being creatively involved. These are all conversations that I'm very, very happy to work through with you. If you're interested in that, again, you can email me and we'll see if we can make it work. It is a little bit dependent on me feeling like there's a fit. I'm not taking on everyone, just the people who I actually feel like I can help, and I don't have that much bandwidth, so we currently only have 2 or 3 more slots left. That's all I'm going to say there. We're going to get right into this conversation now with Drake Margolnick.
Saturday, I was just sitting here producing, working on a new song with an artist that I kind of represent and write and record for. Her name's Adina Rey. She's like an up and coming artist. She's really good. But anyways, I was just sitting here working and I felt an unnatural rush of heat go through my body. But kind of takes you back and you're like, oh, fuck. And I knew something was about to really go down. So I didn't want to worry them. So I just kind of excused myself and went to the bathroom. And then that's when everything's blacked out. Apparently I got into the bathroom and I hyperventilated and passed out and then collapsed, hitting the sink and then falling into the bathroom or the bathtub. So I got a concussion and I broke my nose.
You can see there's like a black and blue right over the bridge of your nose still.
Yeah, it's there. So it's real. But
and are you conscious during that, or are you blacked out, or like what's your inner experience going through that?
No, I don't remember any fall. I don't remember even arriving at the bathroom. All I remember is leaving this room and going to the bathroom. I mean, it must have been a matter of seconds. There was really nothing I could do. Mm-hmm. There was nothing. And that's the most frustrating part about it. It's not a mental thing. I'm not sitting here thinking about PTSD. I'm not thinking about anything that's negative. It's just something takes over my body physically. Maybe it's pressure that I'm unaware of. I don't know what triggers it. I couldn't tell you. But whatever did it triggered something. And this is the 4th or 5th big one I've had since I got my PTSD back in 2016. So anyways, next thing I know, I'm surrounded by paramedics and my friends. Everybody looks like terrified, like I'm dying. I've got blood all over my face and I'm just completely drenched in sweat. And I couldn't remember who I was for a minute. I definitely had no idea where I was. I was seized up a bit, like when you see a football player get a concussion, that kind of thing. And so, I went to the hospital in an ambulance, and from there, things just kind of started coming back, and they gave me like an emergency bit of medicine for something I already take, but something I was out of. And for whatever reason, they gave me a tetanus shot, which I thought was super random. But everybody was nice, and it was clearly, obviously, a very traumatic thing that's taken me. I'm still kind of foggy to today. I mean, what is that, like 5 or 6 days ago?
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, I think these concussions are kind of compounding, and are probably getting worse every time. So the new rule of thumb that we've all come up with is the moment I feel that I lay down wherever I am. It doesn't matter if I'm in like a subway, like subway store or a subway station. I have to lay down wherever I am so that I don't fall. But yeah, just to tell you guys where the PTSD stems from. I mean, I do accredit it to one big event, but I've also had other traumas throughout life that probably built up into this as well. Like, my stepfather was pretty abusive, and I hate to even say it because he ended up being such a great man. I don't like holding it to him, but things like that. Maybe rest in peace and stuff like that. But yeah, the big event, 2016, I was living in Noda, which I lived in Noda most of my adult years in Charlotte. I loved the neighborhood. There was one night I got home from hanging out with everybody, and I just couldn't sleep to save my life. And back then I'd love to run. So it was like, I mean, to be fair, it was a weird time to run. It was 3:30, 4 a.m. But I felt safe in Noda. I always have. Like, I've never really felt unsafe there. I mean, all the years I spent there, with the band houses that we had in Noda and all of we were cool with all types of people in our neighborhoods, so it just felt really safe. But this particular night, I had probably made it about 2 miles, and then I was across the street from the YMCA on Noda, and there's like this grass patch of grass on the other side, and I was running right there, had my headphones in full blast, and then I just get bashed in the back of the head with a gun. And obviously, I didn't know it was a gun at the time. To be completely honest, I thought this has got to be one of my friends messing with me, right? Like, that's what went through my head immediately. Like, I almost expected to turn around and laugh at something. And then I turned around and then I got pistol whipped in the face with a gun again. And that really made me super foggy. Like, it wasn't like a love tap, So I was carried into the vehicle, and there's 2 men in the front, and I was in the middle back seat, and 2 men to either side of me, guns directly at my head the entire time. I was like this the whole time. I tried to keep my hands up and my eyes down because I didn't want them to think I just wanted to make it out somehow. But the whole time they were, first of all, trying to see what I had and how to get it. So I took them to my house. I didn't want to, obviously. I kind of explained the map, the layout of the house, because I had a roommate who was in there asleep. And I said, don't want to mess with that man. He's a big Samoan guy, one of my great friends. And somehow he didn't wake up. They found all, my TV, my computer, my phone they already had. I didn't have a lot to steal. Music gear, but they didn't bother with it. And then, so I thought, okay, this is it. This should be it. They have my stuff. This should be it. And this is the moment where it turned extra bad for me, because they said, no, you're coming with us. You're coming with us. We're going to deal with you, that kind of stuff. And then that's when I'm like, okay, fucked. Like, they're going to kill me. Like, there's no other use they have for me. And they're sitting there talking about killing me. Like, they kept saying pop, like, we pop them here, pop them there, or whatever. So that's when I just kind of went into a different zone. And I just stopped paying attention to them and listening to them. I don't know. You just kind of, when you think you're about to die, you just kind of go into a different place. Anyways, I don't know where they drove me or how far they drove me. Ended up in some random ass dead end road. Get me out. Put me in a ditch face first. It's muddy, I remember, because there's water and there's some kind of stream running. And I remember just sitting there. I mean, the gun's pointing at my head. I know it is. I'm just sitting there waiting for a bullet, you know? And I really wasn't crying for my life anymore. I tried that, you know? It's super, like, fucking embarrassing to do it. But I did what I could. They weren't listening to me. And it felt like a year went by and I was just laying there waiting. And the way I understand it is the guy who was doing the driving, he is like the one who didn't want to be around the murder. And so I think it's the best of my memory. I think he kind of influenced the one guy who really wanted to kill me the most to go. So, I mean, I didn't hear them leave. I didn't see them leave. Enough time went by that I finally looked up to see when the car was gone. I didn't hear the car leave. Like, when you're in that moment, at least for me, who I am, you stop hearing things normally, and blood is just, you hear blood in your brain, like rushing. That's it. So, you know, I got up hysterical, started knocking on, I was in a ghetto part of Charlotte, started knocking on doors, and of course no one's answering at probably 4:30 at that time. And then I just ran until I found Main Street, and then I found a 24-hour veterinarian office. I still couldn't tell you where it is to this day. I don't know exactly where it is, but I got in there, and I guess they're nurses, but the little woman who worked there took care of me, and they saw how messed up I was. And the first thing I did was call the cops, and I sent them to my house because I was afraid they might go back and mess with my best friend, Dan. So the cops finally come and get me, and the cops are just as bad as these motherfuckers, man. The cops were so shitty. I will always speak ill of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Not just for this one thing, but also how they handled past indiscretions towards my mother from other men. CMPD is not a good police department. They tried to make me feel like it was my fault for running that late. They went as far as to try to convince me that it didn't happen at all. And it's insane. It was insanity. And, you know, it was, there was no way in that moment that I could have known how this would have affect my life going forward. Honestly, the day after, I was just relieved. And I did an interview with the news station. Like, looking back, I wouldn't have done that. But I just felt like, okay, I survived it. Like, screw them. I made it. I'm going to talk about it, you know? But I just had no idea that months later, this thing I never really understood, PTSD, would come knocking and would become a huge part of my life. So yeah, I mean, it took weeks, months for it to really set in any kind of real repercussions of it. I literally played a show 2 days after it happened. because I was releasing an EP, and I didn't want to cancel it. I wanted something to do. And, you know, the cops were really weird about that, but I was like, dude, I literally don't have shirts for sale. I'm not making money on the tickets. I don't even have the EP for sale. Like, I'm not sitting here making, like, I was just doing it for fun. Like, I was signed to a record label. It was a fun EP, and I don't think I never put it out on streaming. It's just on MusicBed. So anyways, you know, that's what comes to mind when I think about all of it. You know, the last thing I'll say is, you know, the cops were so useless that the computer that was stolen, my computer, it pinged an hour outside of the city, and told the cops about it immediately. They said it was out of their jurisdiction. They weren't going to go check on it. So literally my cousin, my own blood, he went to the apartment complex to investigate. The cops wouldn't even do it. Meanwhile, the cops are calling it a high-profile case.
Like, were they trying to say that you were targeted?
I don't know what they were trying to do. All I know is they couldn't do anything about it, and it seemed to piss them off that they looked kind of like they had their dick in their hands. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously that had nothing to do with me, but that was a great lead, and I was just so blown away that it wasn't looked after, because I really couldn't give anyone a good description of these men. The four black guys, just the reality. And I purposely kept my eyes down for the most of the time, because I didn't want them to think I was trying to look at them. I didn't want to look at them. You know, that was like defense. That was my defense mechanism. It's like, I don't care who you guys are. But, so yeah, but unfortunately, so my cousin, he couldn't really do much of anything. It was an apartment complex. Could have been anybody in there. But, you know, the really terrible thing is that I can't remember if it was a week later or 2 weeks later, but not a long time after my abduction, my kidnapping, it happened to another woman. It happened to a woman, someone else, in Plaza Midwood, not far away. And she was, in fact, killed. And everything in my heart told me it was the same people. And, you know, I've speculated as much as I can, and all I can really say is that I think it was like a gang initiation, some kind of very serious kind of initiation like that, where they had to prove themselves. That's really, after I heard that, I knew that I should have been killed. But they were serious. They were going to kill me. So, so anyways, that's that.
It's a lot, man. That's quite the experience to live through.
It's a lot. And, you know, I've only had these kind of pass out concussion vibes about 4 or 5 times, like I said, since the event. It had been quite a while, years since it had last happened. So it never happened during the day in broad daylight. It was always like at night I'd get up and like fall down. But so this was very, I had honestly had not thought about it in this detail in years. And now it feels like it happened yesterday. Just sitting here thinking about it. So I did 3 years of therapy, regular therapy. I did EDMR therapy, hypnotherapy. I did a week of ayahuasca in Peru, which was the most important week of my life, I would say. So I've sought treatment and help. And then I'll say again, the most frustrating part about it is that it's not here. It's a physical thing that happens, and I could not tell you what it triggers it. I just couldn't tell you.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's like it just seems like it doesn't matter how much work I do. It's like it's a lingering possibility.
Yeah,
that's that.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I've been through Similar but different. I mean, I've never been explicitly threatened to be murdered. I was in a close call in Haiti once with a gang when we were filming some nonprofit work down there, but didn't end up getting caught, didn't catch that side of the stick, but did, the more recent one was a few years ago. This was probably like 3 years ago. I actually just thought I had a stomach bug and was like up tossing and turning in the middle of the night, got up thinking I was going to go throw up, walked into the bathroom, immediately blacked out and just like hit the floor, landed on my head, and was in a, I would imagine, a similar state of just like, where am I? What's going on? Am I dying? I remember thinking I'm going to have to reschedule my podcast in the morning. And then I'm like peeling myself up off the floor and I crash again. And at some point in there, it woke my wife up. She comes and tries to open the bathroom door, but I'm kind of against the bathroom door because I fell inside of it. And I like peel back up and I'm leaning against the wall and it's like, all that sensation. I got really cold was my experience. Like my whole body felt like ice all of a sudden. And I was just sitting there with that and being like, I might be dying. I might be concussed. I might be fine. And I'm just going to sit here with that. But I think for me, there was some element of like the actual, whatever was going on in my gut, but I've had a lot of deep dives on the trauma side of things. I think mine is presented more as more CPTSD, you know, a lot of that like chronic little stuff from growing up, parents separated, lots of money stress. I did threaten suicide and got ignored when I was young, and that was a major traumatic event for me. I think that was my first like really big disassociation, which was what came to mind when you were saying like I'm not even hearing them anymore, is like you just black out into another planet. You know, it's like I don't want to listen to you plan my murder. I don't want to listen to you call my bluff on killing myself, and so you kind of just like go to another planet. But it's like my experience has been that you can rationalize that stuff, but there's parts of it that still live in your body and in your nervous system. I did a journey, what was this, back in June, where we did sort of a sequence of psychedelics, and it was interesting because I had this thing come up where at the beginning I could feel myself trying to disassociate and I couldn't. And then I started like shaking and they were like, oh, that's your nervous system resetting. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I don't feel like I've been through enough that like my whole body should be spazzing out right now. And they're like, well, your body does. And an important thing to note here is that like when you're a kid and you have an emotional response, that kid part of your nervous system is pre-verbal, right? It's like, I'm hungry, I'm hot, I'm cold, and you telling it food's coming or whatever else is irrelevant. And even as you grow up, that part of your nervous system that's like, I'm unsafe because of an emotional reason, because of a contextual reason, because your system's cueing in on something that's reminding it of that situation, you can sit here and rationalize to it all day and be like, that was 9 years ago, but to your body, it's kind of still the same, and it comes back up. So I've been doing a lot of nervous system and somatic work, which has felt helpful, but I also don't know, honestly. It's like, I mean, I would like to hope that this stuff can be transcended on some level, but there are definitely days where I'm like, it might also just be a scar that you get to carry, you know? And
well,
I feel like
I think the act of trying to build barriers and walls for protection is in itself a good thing to do. Like, it's regardless of it being like, okay, now this is the answer. It's still like the action of taking care of yourself. Right. It does make a difference. I definitely feel that way. Right.
Well, and it's interesting.
But I'm sorry that you've experienced some of this yourself. Like, I know just through this experience, talking on Instagram I'm very vocal with my base, or, I don't like calling them fans or supporters or whatever. They're just my friends at this point. Mm-hmm. And I talk to everybody I can. And what has been revealing is, one, how many people care. It's been overwhelming and just beautiful. And then also the amount of people who also shared trauma and wanted to talk about it. Mm-hmm. More people than I would have thought. And it's almost, I think that's ultimately why, because I was weighing if I was going to talk about this stuff at all, because I've always been pretty open, and I talked about it back then, but I haven't talked about it since, not really. But it's almost like trauma and what comes with it is like taboo almost, or seen as a weakness, or as something that something's wrong with you. And it's just not the case. It's scars. Like, I think it is scars, but we do the work that we can do, and we keep seeking new ways to prevent these kinds of things. But I think it's really important that we talk about it,
right,
with each other.
I agree. I mean, that's part of where I have this tendency of making these like funny little aphorisms almost. And I had made something a few years ago, which we'd since put on some hoodies. But it was this super secret keepers club. And the subtext was the best secrets aren't kept. And for me, like what that speaks to in me is the value of spaces where you can share those stories. Because the story is its own trauma, and then the containing the story inside of yourself and the shame around the story and the not wanting to put the story out there or whatever else, like that's a double level of the wound so often. And it's like I've found, in 13 years of telling all sorts of stories too, it's like it's not all about trauma, but there is so much power, so much connective power, so much growth in revealing these things and revealing these things in a context where it can actually get received and all of that. But yeah, I feel like that's such a powerful thing, because you also, every time that you break the great taboo, you give everyone else a little bit more permission as well, right? Where it's like, there's all these
we do that for each other.
Right. Yeah. Like they're not going to say it, but then they hear your story and they're like, oh, I have this experience that I've never told anyone about. And so it is part of that almost like collective processing that we're all doing. So I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sorry that you went through that, man.
Absolutely.
I mean, that sucks a whole lot of donkey dong, but I'm glad you're here.
What I keep saying, I just appreciate the care and concern, and that has been overwhelmingly positive in a kind of very negative moment. And I'm reminded of the community that I am blessed with. And, because sometimes, you can probably relate in the creative world, on these social media platforms, it can start to feel like no one's there. Mm-hmm. Just because we all get kind of fatigued from content, or what I even hate saying the word content at this point. But it was a very nice reminder that they're still there. Yeah. And when it really matters most, they're going to be there. And so that was really, really nice to take away from that.
Dude, I totally feel that. I've been feeling a little bit of that, where like I've been getting more actual interaction, which has been nice. But, I've said before, and I still feel this way, it's like putting things out into the world now, I feel like there's always two big moments, and neither one is the moment that you expect to be the big one, which is like the moment that we lock something. Whether it's a music video, a documentary, whatever else, like the minute we go, this is done and we're going to put it out, that's a big moment.
That's my favorite one.
The moment where you put it out is kind of just to me at this point. Like you see the little number ticker, your stream count or view count or whatever else, and it's kind of like the numbers don't mean anything anymore and it doesn't feel real. And then the moment that someone says something to me about the project, like the moment that I get a DM or I'm walking down the street, I remember we put a doc out a few months ago and I was in Nashville for something else, and a guy came up to me and he was like, hey, I saw that project you did and it was really cool. And it's like, just having a human being acknowledge it is somehow a bigger moment than like watching it get 100,000 views over here. That feels so abstract to me. But to your point where it's like, someone reaches out to replies to a story or whatever, it's like that can feel so much more connective than having a million views or whatever else, just like feeling the real person on the other side, because it does feel like a void a lot of the time.
Yeah, I completely vibe and feel with, roll with that, with what you're saying. Yeah, I like to be completely honest. So I've gone back and forth throughout my whole career, valuing social media and then absolutely loathing it and wanting nothing to do with it. And I think I just oscillate between the two. And often when I'm in the middle, that's when it's probably most functional. But I really don't. I'm not that old of a guy, but I'm old enough to know and remember when it was what I do is more about music than my ability to make my music interesting to via like skits or like sketch comedy or like whatever it takes these days. And I have so much respect for the kids and the adults who are doing it well. It's not easy. And, but I do have this piece right now. I hope it's sustainable and lasts, where like, as long as I believe the work is good, then I'm happy. And that's what's most important to me now. It's like, there's nothing worse than putting out some work, creative work, or really probably for anybody in any field. And then maybe 3 or 4 years later, go back and think, oh man, that was filler, or that was an attempt to be something that I'm not. And I can't say that I have a whole lot of those, but I definitely have some. I think it's unavoidable. But
do you have an example
right
of that?
now,
Like something that you look back at that feels objectively inauthentic?
I mean, I tried to do something very, I'd say, ambitious and audacious with my solo album that I put out. The one I made it in Los Angeles and London and Tampa. It was a real like worldwide thing that I did. Yeah, we put everything we had into it, and I wanted to try and cross over into mainstream kind of ballad rock and get outside of the indie alternative thing that I've always done and done well, in my opinion. And it wasn't a failure. It just, there are some really good songs on it, but some of it is inauthentic. Yeah, I would say some of it was just me desperately wanting to find a big way to sneak in to something that is really hard to get into in the first place. It was my attempt. So I listened to it and I'm like, I'm really proud of the people I work with, and everyone did a killer job. But just in my heart, I'm almost kind of glad I didn't get what I wanted. Because I'm where I'm supposed to be musically, returning back to my indie alternative roots. It's just what makes me happy. So, you know, I'm not particularly religious, but I do believe in a divine source. And I think they had my back on that one. Sometimes getting what you want could be the worst thing for you. And I can think of many times that would have been the case for me. So yeah, I truly just like to be an open book and be honest about this stuff, because it's like, it's more, our stories are so much more interesting when we're real about them. Yeah. And better than anything I could like make up. Yeah. So yeah. And then, you know, there's always at least one filler song, even when you believe there isn't one. Yeah. I feel that. For the most part, I'm really proud of my discography and proud of everyone I've had the ability to work with. Right. Truly. Yeah, I mean, it's such a strong body of work, and it's something that you've been doing for so long. I mean, I think that's something that I've struggled with a few times is like,
I feel like there are times that things have felt objectively inauthentic, and there's also a time that you just try something and you don't realize until the other side of trying it that you're like, that's not it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's like that's part of the journey too. I'm curious. I
wouldn't say I regret making what I made.
Right. It's a good experiment still. It's part of the process. Well, and it's an opportunity, to your point. I've felt that before, where like I've had my moments of flying close to the sun, and one of the things that I've felt is like the attention is not worth it if I'm not doing things that I love and I'm proud of. And so like I would rather burn it all down and start over and like have a better sense of what that alignment is. And I will choose to believe that like if and when my moment comes at that level, it's like I want to be as aware and as true in what I'm doing as possible. And so like
100%.
Let's get all the experiments out now. Let's try stuff, and like we're going to keep trying stuff, but I had, what was this? This was 2016, 17. I had really done the like filmmaking educator route for a few years, and I was just super burnt out. But I had a Patreon and a YouTube channel and a podcast and 20,000 Instagram followers. And I was like, dude, I just can't do this anymore right now. And like, I literally just deleted all of it. I like deleted my Instagram, started over. And it was funny because people were like, what are you doing? And I was like, it's not worth it if you don't love it. Like it's getting attention is also not that hard these days. It's like, if you just want to get views on TikTok, there's some easy formulas there, but I would want to get views doing things that I loved, And so it's like, for me, that core sense of creative integrity and how you want to show up in the world is like such a big guidepost. And it's like, to me, the people who make the greatest long-term impact are also the people who actually stay really true to that. Like you have the people who have their 5 minutes of virality, but like when I think about the artists who have really shaped me, it's people who were doing incredibly unique things for incredibly long periods of time for the most part.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that there are so many stages in a creative life. And it feels like, man, I've been doing this forever. I'm 38, probably realistically 18 years into the industry. But I still feel so young, and I feel so virile.
Yeah.
I still feel so potent. And I'm really grateful for that, because that wasn't the case for a while. I mean, I went through some really hard times. So I don't know how much you know about Flagship and our history, but we were signed for 11 years. Like I lived my dreams, a version of them. I didn't get as big as I wanted to be. But I had the life that I wanted. I toured for a decade.
And you guys were like touring big places all over the world, big partner bands.
We were national worldwide band touring Europe, and it was the dream. I was living my dream, no doubt about it. And things start happening, band members. It's just so wildly unrealistic to be able to keep a group of people together when life comes at you and you're like, you want to get married, you want to have kids, you want to have this house, you want to have this job. So members start changing a lot. I love them all to death dearly. But I remember, when we lost Grant, and I'm not sure if you're aware of Grant Harding, he was already out of the band, but Grant and I kind of steamrolled the best version of Flagship that came about, the version that got signed and did so well. And, Grant passed, and that triggered a lot of terrible behavior from me and a lot of uncharacteristic. Just the drinking became something else. It turned into a whole new beast, and so I slowly watched that dream and those good times fade away, eventually my record deal was up, and so that felt like a pulled out from underneath me after 11 years of being used to a certain way of doing this with budgets for everything, you know, to no budgets. I pretty much was like, okay, I'm done. I've lived the dream. I'm done. And I began drinking myself to death in Nashville. Nashville is a wonderful place for so many people, but it was my own personal hell. Nashville was not good for me. It doesn't mean it's not a good place. But I can't operate the way most people do in Nashville. I can't view music in the same way that so many do. God, I wish I could, because there's great fellowship and great money in it, and that's how you buy a home and do things. You know, I get it, but I just couldn't. I couldn't join the club, and so I just spent every dollar I had on drinking, and my kidneys were failing, like I was dying, and it took one very fortunate blackout. Nobody got hurt, but I ended up in jail for 3 nights. Because I was stabbing walls in my bedroom. Just blacked out. Just as drunk as someone can be. And during those 3 days in the Nashville detention, that's when I made a decision, you know, I actually don't want to die. I don't want to ever be in here again. Because those 3 nights in detention were horrible. I had a cellmate who had eaten a whole bag of cocaine before he got in because he didn't want to get caught with it. He was a big, scary dude. He scared the shit out of me, and I did my best just to be his little buddy. And I was withdrawing from my prescription medications. I was withdrawing from alcohol. I was shaking, tremors, like torment, 3 days of torment. And then my mom came and got me. Thank God for her. And she brought me home to North Carolina. And so I've been back here for almost 2 years now. I'll be 2 years sober in June 11th, I believe. So really close. Man. Thanks, man. It'll be the second time in my adult life that I've made 2 years, but this time is definitely a lot different. That first time I was sober, I really missed it. You know, I really missed it hard. And God, I truly never think about it. Don't miss it. If I'm at a bar, it's just bottles.
Right.
There's nothing to me. So I couldn't be more grateful to have not died all these many times that I probably should have. And now I have this opportunity to rebuild everything, and I'm making my best work I've ever made right now. I feel very confident in that. And I have nothing right now. Like, I travel light right now. And, you know, you'd think that would hurt your spirit or bring you down, but it just doesn't for me. Like, I just don't need much right now. And all I need is the ability to make music, and that's what I've got. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just like, I'm in a really, really good place, having gone through true hell.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it. And again, I mean, I can relate to aspects. I had a similar but different moment back in January. So my wife and I are going through a divorce, which thankfully is actually really, really good and healthy, and super grateful for her. But it was like, we were kind of waiting to get into it until the holidays were over. And then I was like, okay, now we're going to like tell people and start figuring it out. And we ended up having this conversation that was like, we should probably take some space from each other. And I got frustrated, admittedly, but I just was like, okay, I'm just going to go figure something out then. And I basically like kind of grumpy rage packed all my stuff and threw it in my car and was like, okay, I'm just going to go somewhere. And I ended up driving around for a bit, slept in my car that night. And it was funny because like I had this massive just emotional wave that came up about all these things, all these memories, all of the, memories of meeting 12 years ago, memories of our old apartment, memories of this whole life, all the feelings. And I'm just like sobbing. And then at some point it's like that all kind of blows through. And then I'm sitting there in my $100,000 BMW and I just started laughing. And I was like, I have so much more than I need. And like, I'm going to have to feel every part of this thing, but like, I'm going to be okay. And then I ended up, my buddy Mitchell, who we'd done a lot of work with, was in town and we were shooting some stuff. And I ended up going and crashing at his parents' house. And I just remember like walking into their house with literally like a backpack with clothes in it and a camera. And I was like, I'm going to be fine. Like, all the stuff is nice. I've, had it, not had it, grew up super broke, pulling couch quarters out to get gas and stuff. And like, have had seasons where I was cash cowing it creatively and have seasons that are super lean. But I feel you on that. Like there's a certain reconnection to the freedom and the like essence of the creative spirit to me where you're like
100%.
Now
I couldn't say it better. The essence is what it's all about is when you find yourself having built all of that up and knowing how hard it was to get even as far as I did go, which relatively speaking for a lot of artists is pretty damn far.
Right. And
then having it be completely, between the pandemic and just the record deal ending, just completely losing it all, like everything. I lost it all. Compounded by me just truly purposefully throwing my life away. You strip down bare and you have that choice. I could have either chosen to die, which would have been just keep drinking until I die, or we'll go for it again, rebuild it, get it all back and more. And that's where I'm at. I'm all for living. I love the people in my life. I love that there are new people coming into my life. I don't have much to offer outside of my time and my skills, and I do offer that to several different people right now. I'm trying to build up other artists around me. I'm building. That's all I'm doing right now is building. And I'm like, my whole motto is do the work and everything else will come. And that's what I'm doing.
Right.
So I don't have the cash. I do not have liquidity at all. I'm at the mercy of kind people. And, there would have been a time where I would be embarrassed to say that, but I just am not, because I know I'm going to be fine, and I know I'm going to get back and further than I probably could have imagined. It'll look different. Of course, it always looks different than you imagine it, but it'll be what it's meant to be, and I have complete faith that I made the right choice to stick around and do my best.
Yeah.
And that's it,
100%.
It's a good place to be. I wouldn't mind having a few more bucks, but it's all good.
Well, and that stuff, I mean, first of all, I just want to say that like, it's so brave. And I just want to like honor that in you, man. Like as someone who's been in the pit, it's like, I know that feeling of like, we're either going to drive it in the wall or something's going to pull up right now. And anytime that thing, I've tended to attribute that to whatever version of a higher power I have is like, because there's no good reason for me to pull up right now. Like it would be really easy to just drive into a brick wall. But something has given the shot that it's like you get to play it forward again, and you still have everything you actually had. Like you have the experiences, you have the skills, you have the relationships, you have so many lessons learned. And so that's where like I'm just a big believer in like there's no such thing as sunk costs. Like you bet it all on black, it all goes away. And I mean, you've been in the world of labels and stuff enough to also know that like money's just kind of fucking made up, and like you can have one meeting and all of a sudden you have $1 million and you're like, well, I had no money yesterday and now there's all the money. Like money's kind of irrelevant. I don't know if that's a privileged thing to say, but it's like it just goes,
Money is more and more a joke to me. Honestly, it cannot and will not ever be my reason for doing anything again. I need it. I want to be able to support myself. I'd love to know what it's like to be married someday. Those kinds of things. I've never done any of that. I have kids. I've never been married. But I'm big on being responsible and not dragging people into bad situations. So, but what I keep on reminding myself is all it takes is one commercial license, and you can get 30 grand, boom, like that, or a TV license, a movie license, and that's how, when I was making good money in like 2017, 2016, 18. It was mostly licensing, and it was just coming, man. And
is that through MusicBed, or do you have like a sync distributor?
It was MusicBed, and also through something that my label had gone through. I think they're called Black Box. I can't remember.
I've heard of Black Box.
It might have been Black Box. I think that rings a bell for me. But yeah. So I'm just continually aware that it just takes a couple licenses, man, and I'll be in a position to do a lot more things.
Right.
And licenses, I believe, will come. I don't know if it will be through MusicBed, because honestly, and I have nothing bad to say about MusicBed, but it does seem to have dried up in ways ever since it became a membership one. I'd like to understand their model better, so I actually intend on reaching out to them. But like I said, I'm full on honest. Like, I don't really hold much back.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying anything bad.
Yeah, no,
but I'd like to understand what's going on over there.
Well, yeah. I'll say from my perspective, I've been semi close with those guys. Was closer when I was in that era. It's like you get into the cool kids club. It's like, and I feel like that's part of where I first saw you, was like we were both in that like people MusicBeds kind of pushing out into the world. Yeah. And I have so much respect and gratitude for everything they've done for the industry, for my career, for community. I personally feel like they really dropped the ball on being this sort of hub for excellence and creativity. Like back when they were doing the sessions, back when they were doing the conferences, like it was a place.
I couldn't agree more.
Like it was the place to be. And I don't know.
I was proud of it. I was constantly pushing it myself.
Yeah, it was a cool thing to be a part of. And then they kind of just stopped that. And then they just kind of got like all of the cheap audio, Artlist, whatever came up. And then it felt like they aimed to match that. And it's like you had this really high level position. And I still think it's the best subscription that you can get out there. But it's also like, I can only imagine as an artist. I mean, back 12 years ago when we were licensing songs, it's like a single license was $500. Now you get unlimited music for $100. And it's like Spotify all over again, where it's like the unit economics of this have to suck as an artist unless you're getting big one-off deals. It
sucks. It might be good for creators of videos, of all sizes and brands and whatever, but it's certainly not good for us anymore, the musicians. And, so I don't know if they end up watching this, but I will be in touch, because I'd like to understand more, because I am, just between you and I and whoever's listening, I am looking at alternatives now.
Right.
And they are out there, and licensing truly is the best way for an artist like me, a musician, to make money, to make real money. And there's so many licensing opportunities out there. All you need is somebody on your behalf to be in those positions, with those relationships, to be pushing the music.
Right.
And that's what they used to do. And it was, and I obviously so grateful for the times when they did do that. But licensing is super, super high on my list of things to get right.
Yeah. Well, I would love to just briefly dive in. I almost feel like we're going to have to do another one of these, because I have so many questions about just like writing and your process and inspiration. But I feel like this is a big point to kind of quickly dive into, because, you touched on the TikTokification of music. You're someone who has been a signed artist for a long time. I would love to very briefly touch on that, because labels are a big topic online right now. You got a lot of people saying a lot of things about deals. I've been exposed to that world more. I'm curious your experience, and just, I guess I'll quickly, you tell me if this is a good way of explaining it, because I realized for most of my life I had no clue how label deals worked. And so it's like anything, you've got a whole bunch of different options. Everyone can customize their deals, but the general format that most people
The
seem to get
360
offered.
deal is most common.
Right. And so they come in, they basically go, we're going to give you upfront money, whatever that is. You're in advance for 100 grand, 300 grand, something. And then we're going to manage all of the income that now comes in for your music. And you're going to get a split, and say it's like a 25 75 split. Is that right? And then so your advance gets kicked back out of your 25%. And then they can also pay for music videos or photography or whatever. But generally, a lot of that stuff is getting paid out of your percent. And so it's like you have access to capital, and you can have access to opportunities, sync placements, whatever else. And then on the other side of it, though, you know, say you get a $250K advance on like a 20% split, they're going to take the first next $1.25 million for your 250 grand. And so that there's a lot of people pushing the like stay indie, own all your music. Some people are still really leaning into labels. And I'm just curious, both your experience with the label and then where you're at now, knowing everything that you know about music. What is the strategy? Is it indie? Is it a label? Is it pursuing sync? Is it pursuing Spotify? Is it TikTok? Like, what is your, knowing everything you know about how to make this work, what's the move for you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, so I was signed to Brighton Tenor Records. As far as labels go, they're not like your average label. They're certainly a boutique label. Very deep pockets, and they spent cash in the way that they wanted to. Well, first off, in case any of them listen to this, I'll start by saying I'm eternally grateful for what they did for us, what they did for me. We certainly did not agree on a lot of things, especially at the end. I was also in a shitty place, and I've done my best to take responsibility for some of that. But with that said, Brighton Tenor is a good label. We signed back in 2011 with them. And back then, they were still pretty much a startup. Mm-hmm. And now they've got legitimate acts that are doing well. Flagship, we were one of, if not the most guinea pig-ish band for them to kind of figure out what didn't work and what did work. A lot of it was what didn't work. Money was spent in a lot of ways that I wouldn't have wanted to spend it. And then, I also spent money on some frivolous things, just to have a good time. So it's really, I have to be really, I'm not usually really careful with my words because I just say what's on my heart. But when it comes to this, to Brighton Tenor, I do hope to be careful because they're great people. Their intentions were always good. There's a little disconnect between them and like the average person. They're fairly wealthy individuals and have been for a long time. And there is a disconnect there between artists' needs and expectations, with touring and then somehow magically being able to come home and have a job that pays well. Money was always like an issue for living expenses, for like keeping us alive stuff. But money was never an issue spending $100K on an album. Or 80K, 80K, 100K, 110K, something like that. And we had a four option deal with them. An option is an album. And, we were so obsessed with our craft and music that we released a whole slew of EPs as well. And none of those EPs counted towards our contract. So,
but they still get run through your splits with the label?
They still don't get run through splits, but they don't count as options.
Lovely.
So it's kind of a disservice to ourselves,
right,
to even release an EP. But I get why they were like, cool, whatever, because it was good for them. And we just wanted to put music out, So that's, I think that's truly how we ended up being signed for so long. bands don't stay signed for 11 years.
Right.
Not in general. Not unless you're just boom, like big.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like you're also...
In some ways that was a good thing, and in some ways it was a bad thing.
Right. Well, that's one of the things that I'm always curious about, too, is like, from my perspective, and I wasn't as in tune with the heyday, so I would love for you to clarify this for me, but it's like, I feel like you guys have been a consistently successful sort of mid-size operation, right? Where it's like, we're not the Killers, we're not some no-name indie artist, we've got label support, we're doing big tours, we're playing with bands like Third Eye Blind. What does that look like at the peak for you guys? Because is that also like you're cresting into, it sounds like you sort of rode the streaming wave, because streaming, in my mind, it's like Spotify was just kicking on around like 2011, 2012 is like sort of when I remember that. So it's like, from a business perspective, because I feel like there's also this disconnect, right? Where it's like you have different buckets where you can have like the touring bucket, the actual money revenue bucket, the sync bucket, the merch bucket.
We just weren't pulling in money from anything that had to do with the label. We just weren't. I mean,
so you're not rich and famous rock stars rolling in the millions. Like, you're touring the world, but you're not.
Well, no, not rich and famous by any means. I mean, I had some individual success with the music bed and a solo EP that I had made and released before I ever met the label. And I got lucky a handful of times and hit some big licensing with that. But no, first, to answer your question, like, when we were peaking, you have no idea that you're peaking. You think that you're just at the next rung and that there's another step coming. So our peak was definitely like 2015, 16, 17, 18 maybe. 18 is when I wanted to go solo. But yeah, you don't really know that you're peaking. We were playing big festivals. We were playing the big crowds. It felt like, and we were becoming radio kind of darlings, I think, because we went to all the radio, like they have radio summits or whatever, and artists come and woo, and we did all of those. The truth is, had Michael and I not chosen to kind of split up in 2018, Flagship would probably be in a really great spot right now. But in 2018, I think Michael probably felt the same way as me, that we were keeping a dead horse alive. It just felt like Grant's ghost was everywhere for me. And I don't know how Michael felt. I would imagine it would be the same. We were still using tracks that we created in our live shows, you know. I was naive enough to think I can take this momentum and spew it, direct it into my solo career, and, you know, play with Michael when I can. But the pandemic really did. The pandemic was the nail in the coffin. Because I had the album, my solo album, which now I'm glad it didn't succeed. But it should have and it could have, because there were big songs. But we finished it right when the pandemic hit, and we sat on it for like a year or two. Sat on it, it's completely finished, and that's when everything unravels. But yeah, you know, we definitely did have a peak, and we were on top. We were top 40 radio on Hot AC charts, which is a big deal, and it's really hard to get. I think we were 45, so we were just under 40, but. That's a big deal on a Hot AC chart. Yeah. Like, for instance, I put out the most recent Flagship LP called Faces on the Wall. I put that out last September, something like that. And it premiered on the radio number 15 on, this is a different kind of chart. but it's not, but the charts are so different. Like Hade C is like, you're up there, you're really doing it. And then this other chart that I came out on, still really cool. Like for a dead band coming back 7-8 years later to even chart on anything is great. But the difference couldn't be more massive between. So I hope I'm answering the question right. I just...
yeah, I think so. I guess I would be curious to just hit that point of like, so being through everything you've been through and being at this place of building, what is the mission, you know, with everything that's going on with streaming and TikTok and sync and like, what's the strategy?
Now, I don't really have... I've kind of thrown my hands up with TikTok. I'll put stuff up there, but it's really not a priority of mine at all, and it does not matter to me. I got Red Note. That's been kind of fun, but mostly just because it's interesting to see how Chinese people really are and see that their country is nothing like what we've been told by the U.S. government, and that they actually have pretty normal lives over there. Red Note has been interesting, but Instagram is where all my people are. You know, I don't really use Facebook. Facebook has turned into a wildly weird place with like everybody's mom and dad and grandpas believing that AI visuals are real things. And it's gotten mad. But the way I'm going to power forward is a way that I hate that I have to do it. It's Spotify. Spotify is crucial. Flagship used to have hundreds of thousands of monthly listeners. Luckily, when I came back from Flagship being dead, there was still like 16,000 monthly listeners, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was like, thank God there's at least this.
Right.
And I'm at like something like 22,000 monthly listeners right now. And my most recent single, Sillin, got like 34,000. So coming back from the dead and being where I'm at, I've still proven that this is possible. There's something to build on. It's nothing to write home about. But it's better than if I'm just some local person trying my darndest to get out there. Like all of the foundation and all the work that I've done in the past has built me a better jumping off point. So it's real and it's there. And so I plan on working radio as well. I did a radio campaign, like I said, for the most recent album, Faces on the Wall. And we got a lot of good radio play nationwide, coming back from nowhere. Like I said, charted at number 15 out of all the albums that released in that month. So radio, Spotify, licensing, those are my three. Like, I gotta have these. I gotta have these.
And are you writing with the intention of licensing, or are you just writing originals and seeing if you can get placements, or like what's the play there?
No, I've never really written. Maybe once or twice I've written with a music bed type thing that they set up for an intentional licensing, but no, just everything I typically make is just licensable. I tend to make pretty epic theatrical music. And so I wouldn't say, no, I'm sitting here trying to make a song to get licensed. But, I'm also venturing into being more authentic in my lyric, cursing when I feel like strong words, I believe, are important for strong sentiments. When I'm talking about something that means so much to me, like Palestine, I'm going to use strong words. Whereas in the past, I probably would have danced around it. Like Sillin, that song I made is for Palestinian women. And women in general, truly, because there is a war on women right now. So I guess I'm starting to write a little bit more politically, but also I'm not shoving anything down anybody's throat. It's still very. I think I know how to walk that line, and so that's what I'm doing. And I've got a whole bunch of songs in the bag right now that no one's heard, and it's good stuff, man. I really feel really confident in what I've been making. And I have a side project called Mirror Mirror that it's a duo, me and Mariah Van Cleef. She is a Charlotte local, super talented in her own right. But we're making, we've pretty much got a finished album of very dark, hard-hitting, Radiohead-esque, other bands that I can't think of right now.
Okay.
I'm bad at comparison.
I mean, you're also still recovering from a concussion. You get a pass.
Yeah. No, my brain is pretty foggy. I won't lie, but yeah. So Mirror Mirror, I've got Flagship. I still intend on doing something with my solo stuff. That's further down the road, and then I've got Adina Rey, who I'm writing for, producing, recording, managing. I'm doing everything for her, and it's just like she's an incredible person. She lost her ability to sing or talk for years, and now we've got her singing incredibly with really great songs, and it's just so cool to be working on other people's music too, and to be as excited about their music as I am about my own. Mm-hmm. It's really opened up a whole nother level of musicianship to me. I've just gotten a lot better somehow recently, and I think it's because my heart has been poured out for some other people too. And it just makes you better when you give yourself away.
That's it for this episode of Second Order Change. I'm so grateful to Drake for taking the time and grateful to you for taking the time. If his story resonated with you in any way, I would highly recommend shooting him a message. We'll have the link to his Instagram and the Flagship Instagram as well as Spotify in the show notes. You can go check that out. But I know there's always a little bit of this like post-vulnerability hangover, at least for me, and hearing that even one person connected with it can be really massive. So if you resonated with any part of his story, shoot him a message or shoot me a message. I love messages, voice memos, text messages, doesn't matter. You know where to find me. As always, I'm just going to remind you, you can share the clips on Instagram. You can like, you can rate, you can review. All of this costs you nothing. All of this takes about 2 seconds, and it makes a really big difference on the trajectory of this show, because even just 2% of the listeners, 5% of the listeners making the decision to do that on a weekly basis, at the end of a year, that's a difference of tens of thousands of people hearing these stories and being impacted. So I know I've been there. You're like, someone else is going to do it. I like the show. I don't have to do it. But this is your chance to be the one that does it. Do the Nike thing. Just do it. You're already watching or listening. You're literally right now, you're so close. Just go pull your phone out, rate, review, text it to a friend, post it on your story, whatever it may be. It really, really matters. You are literally having a butterfly effect that will ripple out into the entire world, because who knows who hears this story? Who knows who may be in their own drinking spiral, thinking about ending it all, and they hear the story and it pulls them out and they become the next big artist who then goes on to change other people's lives. This is the magic of storytelling, and you have all the power to make a very big difference in the world. I'll leave it at that. I trust you, and I hope you do too. Next week, we're going to be back with the incredible Michael Dalton. Michael is a filmmaker, artist. I'm kind of giving up on talent, on labeling people. It's not working for me unless they tell me what they want me to call them, because it's like Michael does so many incredible things, and you're going to see that in the podcast. Michael is a dad. Michael is an artist. Michael is a filmmaker. Michael is an entrepreneur. Michael is an athlete. Michael is a skateboarder. What can I say? Michael's Michael. He's entirely unique, entirely perfect, and I'm so grateful for the time as we talk about emotions, grief, and our experience of those things as men, which, maybe you're not a man, but it still might be insightful for you. I don't know. I'm very curious to hear how people feel about this, but I'm going to give you a little taste of that right now, and we will see you next week on Second Order Change.
Like my dad died, and my body had this reaction. I was like, I'm never going to let this feeling happen to me again. I'm like, as I process it, I'm like, I'm not going to let anybody else close to me die. Like, how do I do that? You know, like,
well, and then it becomes the implicit option is you just don't let anyone close to you anymore, right? Because it's like death's inevitable. Right. So I guess we're just going to lock it all down again so that we don't go through that.
The ways that will have a fruitful life, it's basically like opening ourselves up to heartbreak and open ourselves up to isolation. And shit, man, like that's so hard.
Right.
That's so hard.
I'm laying in bed one night, jet lagged. It's 2 a.m. My eyes are closed. And for whatever reason, my system's just like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to relive the day you and Mandy met from start to finish.
Oh.
Like the waking up in the morning, the going to get a burrito, the stopping at the costume store, going to a Halloween party. And it's like, one, I didn't know that I remembered all of this. Like that's why it's one of the most fascinating things to me in that experience, where you're like, this emotion contains all this memory that I thought I didn't have.
Right.
And I'm just going to sit here for an hour and a half and be so grateful for all of it and bawl my eyes out again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And like, remember, it's your dream to live. You might as well enjoy it. Bye.